the law. I've come to fulfill the most important part, the spirit. You've lost the spirit. So we believe that you look around the Muslim world right now. What do we see? You can ask Muslims, don't ask a non-Muslim, ask a Muslim, what do you see in the Muslim world? Do you see that era of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his early companions, and even extending the first few centuries after his life? We no longer see that. We see what he warned us, that Islam would now become merely a name. The holy book would become merely a nicely bound edition on the shelves of people. And the mosque would be beautifully decorated and built, but they would be devoid of spirituality. In fact, what they would be, the seed and the source of disorder on earth. It would go from it and revert and right back to it. That is the shocking scenes we see every day now we turn on the television sets. The mosques themselves, the Mosque of God in Islam, have become the sites of military campaigns, with bombings and suicide bombings and terrorist attacks, and all these things are being planned in them and are coming back to be the source of their own destruction. The Muslim world has fallen down as the Jews had fallen to a lower state, politically, economically, and socially, under the dominance of the Western Roman Empire. Now the Muslims are under the dominance of this Western nations, who are controlling every aspect of them. And both groups were waiting for Jesus to come, looking to the skies, is he going to drop down, but hoping this Christ will come with a sword in his hand and a military behind him to overthrow the Western power and restore them to control. Isn't that what we see in the Muslim world right now? Exactly. The insurrections and the rebellions and all the things going on right now, they completely mirror what the Jews did during the time of Jesus Christ. You've heard of the word zealot. Who were the zealots? They were the Taliban of their day, who felt that we're going to, at any means, any cost, we're going to overthrow this government. And when Christ said, no, I've come with peace and prayer and love and patience, they said, get out of the way. We don't need this kind of Messiah. We want to fight them. But every single fight that they fought, every single one, from the Maccabean Revolution to later on, they had different groups. They were destroyed completely by the Roman Empire and wiped out. And that's what we're seeing now amongst the Muslims. Every effort they're making with this so-called Al-Qaeda and Taliban and these efforts they're making, they're failing them and they're being wiped out and being destroyed. So history is repeating itself. The solution was the same. Go back to the pristine, pure teachings of the faith. That's why a Messiah had to come to the Muslims. The same reason one had to come to the Jews. To show them their faith is one of peace, is one of prayer, is one of patience, is one of goodness, of humanity, of justice, etc., which they had lost sight of, and not violence and terrorism and warfare and militancy and all these things that is going on right now. And that's the only difference between him and other prophets. A prophet of peace is called Messiah. One who would take the blow and not give the blow. So this is why it's so necessary, and I think others who are non-Muslim will hope such a spirit would take hold in the Muslim world.
Rabbi Azhar, we have very little time, and I wish this program was an hour extended so we could discuss the second part of this topic in full. But unfortunately, we have sort of 10 minutes remaining. But I'd really like to get this topic sort of brought forth 1400 years. And let's talk about the promised Messiah, Islam, as we know him as Ahmadi Muslims. Who was this person? Tell us his name, and what were his signs? What were the signs of his advent, and why, as Ahmadi Muslims, have we accepted Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian as that promised Messiah that was to be, expected, foretold in Islam?
Yes. His name, to begin with, was Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, or Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian. He was born in Qadian, raised there. His mission was one to bring all of humanity now, not just the followers of Prophet Muhammad, but all of humanity under God's spiritual kingdom. This is a mission which everyone believes will be the role of the Messiah. In the Bible you have this concept that when the Messiah appears, there'll be the era of peace and justice will reign. There'll be peace. They put it in the sense that the wolf will lay down with the calf and the lion with the lamb and all these things. This is a time when the aggressive and the passive natures of human beings or nations would finally be in balance. And there would be no more fear of wars and tyranny and injustice. So this is the first thing he was to do. And we see that now through the Ahmadiyya community. A reordering of the mind and hearts of people to wish the best for one another. By God's grace, this is a community that's established, once again, the highest ethical and moral code of conduct that God wishes for humankind, which is found in the Quran, and was always the ethical code of religion. The second thing is, there would be the end of all warfare. You know, people ask the question, if the Messiah has come, why are we still fighting the wars? It does take time. The first century of Christianity wasn't a century where peace was ushered on earth. It took 3 centuries before they could even gain a foothold in one nation. And from then they began to spread. So Hazrat Ahmad said the same thing, that within 3 centuries you will see this community become the dominant force, but not through war, not through holy jihads. Through principles of justice and equity and humanity, etc., they will begin to win over, because beauty is recognizable from that which is ugliness. And that's been our mission. Love for all, hatred for none is our motto, and this has been a winning message. It was the message of Christ, love, love, love. It's the message of Hazrat Ahmad. Love, love, love. Lastly, what I have seen with my own eyes, we talk about Africa. I went there last year, in April of 2008, for the celebration of 100 years of those individuals who succeeded Ahmad as the successors, the Khalifas. And we celebrated that occasion there first in Ghana. When I went for the first time to Mother Africa, I was elated. Unlike many of my fellow citizen brothers and sisters in America who go there and they feel relieved, but they feel also depressed. They feel burdened by, such a cruelty and injustice, and I'm reliving it and all that pain they go through once again. Well, I felt all that. But I felt something else. I felt the promise of Africa and all peoples who had been for centuries oppressed and suppressed. Because now, under the rule of this Messiah, every human being was going to be freed. Every human being at last was going to be given equality, which is the real essence of a human being. We should be equal in the sight of God, in the sight of each other. And that was happening because the Khalifa went there, first and foremost. And you know what he said? He said the same thing that Mr. Obama said when he went recently. He said that Africa's time has come. Africans will be the nations in the future. Nations in the future who will lead the world. And by God's grace, we see this era coming through the grace of the Messiah in this age. So it's a powerful message for Africa, just as in the days of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He lifted up the slaves. The slaves from Bilal's case, he was a slave before he died. They would point to Bilal, the former slave, and say, this is Sayyidina Bilal, our leader Bilal. And that's a magnificent transformation which only God's messenger can do. So I see that potentially as the greatest feat for humankind, to lift up people, to create equality, to create humanity, and usher in the era of peace. Slowly but surely it's happening. If someone would come to our gathering, which we had this past weekend, you would be amazed. I mean, literally amazed at the brotherhood. People from every continent, every color, every culture, every language, but sitting hand to hand, shoulder to shoulder, bowing, hugging, embracing, and speaking as if we came from one mother. This can only be done by God. And this is being done to the Ahmadiyya movement by Allah's grace.
Murabis, thank you so much for that. And Murabis, I would, we have literally a minute left to go, and I'm going to ask you to leave our listeners with, a short message. You've got about 30, 40 seconds. If you could leave our listeners with one message, what would that be?